I remember when I started riding a bike. My dad was the one who taught me how. They bought me a bike when I was probably about 8 years old, but I couldn't ride it for a long period of time because, first of all, they got it for me when it was cold weather, and then I had training wheels on it, but the street we lived on at the time was kind of a busy street, and so they didn't really want me riding out there and learning how to ride with training wheels with nobody out there with it. So I got to go to my grandparents' house, and they had a lot of roads close to them that were really easy to ride on and everything, so they thought that would be a great place to learn. So my dad would take me over, and we actually, in the yard, would start out first, and he would actually help me along. And it got to be the point where I was using the training wheels, and then it was time. My dad said, "You've been doing that way too long. It's time to get those off there. You need to learn how to ride on your own." And so he took them off, and as we were getting ready for this, my dad thought, maybe the grass is better, so there's not skin knees involved and all that kind of stuff. So he put me on the bike, and he would come along behind and help me and give me the balance I needed. And we did that for a while, but every time I felt like I was going to fall, I would just put my legs all out, like this, and let him balance the bike. And that really wasn't helping me learn how to ride a bike. Maybe you had the similar experience. But I know that for me, it was great because my dad, once it was time, he said, "You know what? You've been on the grass long enough. Now it's time to get out on the concrete, the pavement. It's time to really ride this bike." And so he started along, and for a while he would hang on to the back of the seat, balance me, make sure I did, and he would give me tips from behind. And then one time it felt different, and I was riding, and I didn't know it, but he had let go of the bike. He saw that I was balancing on my own just fine, and he let go of the bike. And by the time I realized that, I was about 100 yards away from him already, and I all of a sudden forgot how to ride again. And I ran right into a tree. It was really kind of bad. It was okay, though. I got right up, and I was so excited for the fact that when I turned around and saw him so far away, I realized I was riding on my own. So then I got a chance to go from there. It was so great. By the end of the day, I was riding on my own. It was so great. The kids didn't make fun of me anymore because I didn't have training wheels. It was fantastic. And then I remember I started thinking about that, and I realized I had similar experiences when I was teaching my own children, how to ride a bike. If you've had the opportunity to teach someone to ride a bike, you know what that's like. You have the different ways that you do it, maybe similar to what my dad did. Maybe, your folks have a different approach to it or whatever. But I remember when I started training, I had a young man, my first son, Nathaniel. He had a black bike with white wheels. And that was a big deal because he thought it looked like a police motorcycle. And so he started loading up water guns and putting them in his belt and the whole deal. Well, by the way, he became a policeman. So anyway, the whole idea was for him to learn. Well, I taught him so well that he went and took his own training wheels off and tried to learn on his own. I mean, that was his experience. My daughter, on the other hand, a little different. Okay? She picked it up fine. The problem was she wanted to see somebody ride first. And so I didn't have a bike at the time, and so I thought, well, I'll just ride hers. And so I got her bike, and I got on it and started riding around the parking lot there close to our house. And, let's say this. Before she could ride it again, we had to go to Walmart to buy a new seat because I broke the other one off. And so that was kind of her experience. And then my youngest, he, he was just pretty cut and dry, the whole walk behind, balance, learned how, took the training wheels off, and he started learning on his own. It was great. But the thing that he remembers the most was the fact that we as a family all rode bikes all the way out on the bike path to Xenia and stopped at McDonald's and had ice cream. That's what bike riding was about to him. Now, when thinking about riding a bike, teaching someone to ride a bike, what that might look like and what it has looked like for you, maybe you can understand why it's so important to consider what we do as parents. And not just parents, but grandparents, aunts and uncles, and even anyone younger than us. We have to be careful not to balance them too much. We have to be careful not to hold on to them and make them be in safe environments for the rest of their lives. We have to be careful not to make sure that they don't experience what it feels like maybe to fall. And then what it's like to have to get back up and ride again. We have to be careful too to not hang on too long and let go and let them ride. And then also to remind them about how great it can be to ride and what you can do with that, where you can go and the fun things you can experience. As parents, as grandparents, even as the church, we have to consider the fact that it's important for us not to let our way of thinking hinder our kids and keep them from going further. Matter of fact, a statement that I would like to remind you. And you might say, Greg, I heard we were doing this parenting thing, and I'm not sure it really applies to me. I don't have kids, or I don't have anyone like that in my life right now. But I want to encourage you that there is always someone. There is always someone younger that you can influence. Maybe that you are thinking, how will this happen? Maybe you're grandparents. Maybe you're a single parent. Maybe you're someone who is, you've taken up the ownership of your kids, friends. Maybe there are people who have come to live with you. Maybe you are just like the Enslins and you've adopted someone. But you have the opportunity, and even as the church, we have opportunities to have influence in the lives of someone younger. I want us to consider this. Who's the youngest person in the room? Let's see. Somebody just tell me, who's young? Yes, what's your age?
I'm 13.
You're 13?
Yes.
Okay, sure. Sure you are. Just tell yourself that. All right, 13 years old. We'll say that. How old are you, bud? 9 years old. That's what we're looking for, all right? Somebody who tells the truth. All right, so 9 years... Oh, yeah, of course. Well, okay, all right. I'll let you have that. Hang on to that, all right? And we'll sign you up to work with teenagers. All right, so 9 years old right here. And who would venture to say you're older? Let me see. Just if you don't care, go ahead. Just say your age. Say your age out loud. Oh, okay. It requires giggling, I guess. I'm not sure. Go ahead. Just say it out loud. 39. All right. Somebody, real age. All right. Yeah. 63. All right. All right. Yeah. 57. All right. Somebody, let's hear somebody go a little even further now. Way in the back. 79. There we go. We found it perfect. That's great. So you kind of got the idea that in this room, there's a wide range of ages. I want to tell you that when we consider this as the church, that all of us, we all are stewards of the faith of the next generation. We all of us, we are all stewards of the faith of the next generation. Not one of us are exempt. 9 years old. All right. There's somebody younger than you that looks up to you. 79. There's a lot of people younger than you and they look up to you. And it's just quite important for us to remember this and to go through it. I want to take you through, because in the history of ancient scripture, we find an important principle that we see there, but it was given as a speech. It was part of what Israel learned about raising and passing on to the next generation all the information that's necessary for them to keep certain things important to them. So I want to take you back to some of those ancient scriptures. Moses was the leader here who actually wrote all of this down. He's the one who actually gave us this speech that he said to all of Israel to remind them. And as we read this, we find out that it applies to us even today. I want to take you to Deuteronomy chapter 6, and this is how it starts. It says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." I stopped there for just a second to say that whenever you see the word "hear" in Hebrew, it was meant to be a stopping point. You turned everything else off and you listened to what was being said. So that's exactly what Moses was doing. He was getting everyone's attention, saying this is important. And this was for them because they knew that the generations that they had under them, they were going to need to pass that on. And Moses was making sure that they understood it clearly. So he got their attention, drop everything, listen to this, it's most important. The Lord our God, the Lord is one. A great statement to say there's no one higher, there's no one greater, there's no one more powerful. Moses wanted that clear, and they were to pass that to everyone. Now, notice that it was not, "Hear, O parents of Israel." This was to everyone. "Hear, O Israel." The whole nation was to hear it. And so I think the statement is for us, if we could replace the word Israel or the name Israel here with Faircreek, as we would as we're going to talk about it throughout this morning, considering that this is our responsibility. "Hear, O Faircreek, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." We want to make sure that that is the highest of priorities when we consider. But then it says, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength." Meaning every part of you, social, emotional, and most of all spiritual, your physical body, every part of you is meant to be a focus on who God is, the one God, and the love that He gives us and the love that we should have for Him. And when we talk about love, it means that we're prioritizing it. It's as if there's no one that we love more. There's not a higher priority for us. There's not something that we have that's more important in our life. And that's exactly what Moses was getting across to them. You know why this was so important? Because they knew that they would be one generation away from never hearing those words again if they didn't pass it on. And it's so important for us to realize that. We are only one generation away from what we know and what we value and what we think is important. Even being here today, this group of people, the church, is one generation from extinction. It's one generation away from failing and not being around anymore if we don't pass it on the same way, the example that Moses gave. Now, it goes on. It actually tells us in some layers of how this should be done. And so he says it first this way: "These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts." When it's supposed to be on your heart, you may have heard someone say, "I was thinking of you. You were on my heart." Well, it's the same concept of thinking that we are considering God on a regular basis. So much so that it sits at the center of who we are. Whenever you see the word heart, it always meant the core of a person, who they are. And so when it's referred to as their hearts, it meant deep inside who they were as people, that they were going to regard these things, these commandments. And I want to make sure we understand, it's not about following commandments or rules here. We're following the things that are important to God. It's out of a reverence, it's out of worship, if you will, that we're following God and His commandments, and they are on our hearts. That's why it's so important, and why you don't want to just be following a set of rules. Rules don't get you nearly as far as you think when you're missing the relationship. And so God was wanting relationship. He wanted people to know He was the one true God, and that we were to love Him with everything we are. And we do that by following the things that are important to Him, because ultimately those things are what are best for us. And that's why He wanted us to follow them. That's why it was so important to do what's next in the verses. The actual idea of then impressing them. Impress them on your children. when you think of impressing, you think of engraving something. That's really what, this was written in Hebrew. And Hebrew, the word for impress means to engrave or to make a deep mark. And so I had the privilege this last Wednesday night to sit down with a group of 4th and 5th grade boys, and we did some wood burning. That just sounds fun in itself, doesn't it? You know, and so we were sitting there, and some of them would take the wood burning tools. Have you ever used those? And they were trying to use them just like a crayon or a pen or a pencil, real fast, trying to write on the wood. Well, you can't do that. You have to slow down, take your time, and as you do that, it leaves a mark, a deep penetration into the wood, and the wood will never be the same again now. Well, that's the concept. You are making an impression into the life of your children. And so remember, I take you back to the beginning. It was, "Hear, O Israel," not just "Hear, O parents." Okay? It was everyone had the responsibility of this being the most important thing you could do, was to impress this on your children. Engrave it in them, if you will, to make sure that they don't forget, that they remember. You make an impression on them that will last. And what is it that they're remembering? They're remembering God is one God, and He's our God. And we've got to love Him with all we are, everything that's about us, and then we are to pass it on to our children. Follow the things that He has made as important. But then He even gives more detail. I love this. He makes it even further. Impress them on your children, but talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. We already saw that example of this up here. A family that is wanting to make sure that their children understand and know who God is throughout, so they're committing themselves to do that. The idea is that this doesn't leave much room for anything else, does it? It's wherever you are all the time. It doesn't matter whether you're at home. It doesn't matter whether you're riding in the car. It doesn't matter whether you're involved in some kind of activity. This is the highest of priorities to be a part of our home and our family life. And just say this. I think that we easily can even get away from that because we have so many other good things to be doing. There's a lot of good that we can do for our children and offer our kids, but we need to make sure that we're doing something that points them back to God is one, and that He is the one that they need to follow, to give everything to have respect and love for, to have it on their heart to follow the things that are important to Him, because that's what's going to be best for them. So you look at this and it's like, how can this happen? Well, I look at it from a standpoint of this. If this is important, I want to illustrate it this way. I think that we a lot of times think that we can make sure our kids are involved in activities here among Faircreek and the things that we do with them. And that's great. It's important to do it. But if we were to consider how many hours a year that we have right here, the average is about 40 hours a year that we might get with any one child here in the church. Anybody 18 and younger, we get them maybe an average of 40. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less in some situations or circumstances, but that's about what it is. Now, for those who have them in their home, it's much different. Those who you have them in your home, you have about 3,000 hours a year. Now, that's a huge difference, right? A huge difference. So this tells me that what happens at home is more important than what happens on Sunday. What happens at home is more important than what happens on Sunday. And the whole idea is because if we don't get the concept of the fact that the people who have those 3,000 hours are the ones who have the most influence, they're the ones who have the more time than we do. And when we consider this, you might say, well, that kind of excludes me. I don't have to worry about it. If it's only 40 hours, whatever. But see, everybody in the church participates in making that vision happen. We'll talk about practically how we can do that here in a few minutes. But everyone, you might say, I don't have kids. I would bring them here if I had them, or I don't have grandchildren close, or I don't have anybody in my family, or the whole point is that there are things that all of us can do together, because remember, we're all stewards of the faith of the next generation. And if that's true, then we have to make this an environment, a place where all of us work together to make those 40 hours the best they can be, so that we are doing the best job of partnering with those 3,000 hours where the most influence is. So if we were considering, what's necessary and why it's important to do this, I want to take you to a point. And we mentioned this already when we had the Enslins up here, but you first got to imagine the end. And when you imagine the end, you're not necessarily thinking about the end of their lives, okay? You're not thinking about that far in the future. You may have a hard time even considering, because of the circumstances or the life situation you're in now, just barely making it day to day. You got to take it and look at the milestones, one milestone at a time. And I'm not talking about, are they sitting up at the right time, and are they at the right, place to be walking and doing all the things that maybe a doctor will give you for development. I'm talking about the fact that socially, emotionally, and most of all spiritually, that they are making those steps in the right direction. The greatest thing that any of us can do and have the greatest influence in someone younger than us is to be sure that they understand and know who God is, that He's the one God, that we should love Him with everything we've got, and that the way to have relationship with Him is through Jesus Christ. That has to be the most important thing that we would do. And so you can understand why leveraging this amount of time here is important, but it's so much more important to make sure that we're partnering together because of how much time children are in their homes, influenced by parents, grandparents, or the people raising them, and the support that they feel from the rest of the church, or the rest of Faircreek. So important. So we have to not only imagine the end, and that means if the end for you has to be a short period of time just to the next thing for them, that's what's important, focusing on that. But on top of this, some of you might say, oh my goodness, my kids are almost grown. Every kid I have influence on, they're older now. What do I do now? Well, let me just say this. It's never too late. It's never too late to start building influence in someone younger. It's never too late to start. And even as a parent, there's hope here. You may say, I have totally failed at this. I have totally ruined it. No. You got to hear this. Matter of fact, one of the reasons why we would even take the time to do this and to talk about these things, offer the event tonight, offer the resources, spend the time and the things that we're doing with children and students. Why would we do that? It's because we know how important it is to support those who are trying to come along those kids and have them those 3,000 hours. So if we were considering this, some of us might say, well, I have done a lot of things. I've put a lot of things in place for my kids, and I hope that they're working, And it's more than just making sure that they have experiences. It means that your influence in their life is what's going to be most important. For any of us to influence someone younger, it's never too late, but it's also important for us to consider really how it works. Proverbs chapter 22 is a great verse. It's sometimes misunderstood, sometimes it's misquoted, sometimes it doesn't make a lot of, people hear it and they apply it in a way that probably is stretching what the verse really means. But let me just say this. This has everything to do with where you are and starting off at that point. Start off children on the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. This is not a guarantee, all right? This isn't, if I teach my kids a certain way, if I send them to a certain school, if I educate them this way, if I make sure they're in every extracurricular activity, then this will make sense. If I make them do these things or I follow through, get the point. This is just a word of wisdom. That if you start them off on the right way, then that's the best way to see this as the outcome. It's the best way to know that they're going to actually not turn away from it when they're old. And I would even say that if you're giving them the information and you're doing it as an educational tool rather than a relational tool, then very easily there's going to be disconnection on this. But if you're relating to them and you're showing them real life and you're living your life in front of them and being the example and doing everything, and as a church, we are living in front of them and setting an example and providing the best environment for them that we can, then we're making it very likely that we've done everything possible so that when they're old, they won't turn away from it. See, it'd be very easy for us to just provide as parents or as grandparents to provide things or to think that we've done this. This isn't about picking what kind of education, again, I say. This is not about trying to do certain things a certain way because you read a blog or a book or something like that that comes from parents that have this high standard of the way it needs to be done. And there's a lot of parent and grandparent shaming going on that if you don't do it a certain way, then you don't really follow. Be careful. This isn't about those kinds of things. This is about a standard that would be for every child, for every family, for every church. Start children off on the way they should go, and when they're older, they won't turn from it. It's a piece of wisdom. It's not a guarantee, but it's the best plan forward for seeing the next generation to be influenced for the right thing. I want to make sure everybody understands this. We want Fair Creek to be safe for every family to find hope and help. We want to do everything we can to prepare this environment. And I want to say, some of us, we've gotten used to a new kind of a game plan of some things we're doing around here. We've changed a few things up. And I want to give you just the why behind it. You notice when you come in today, you have a parking crew now. Notice that? They bring you in, they put you in place and all that. Some of us, it's hard for us because we know where our parking place is. We know exactly where our parking place is, and it's marked with our oil stain. We know it dropped in just the perfect way. It looks just like Mickey with ears, all right? You know exactly where your parking place is. But let me tell you what this does. By providing this, we actually make people coming to the next service, we make there plenty of parking so they don't have to drive around the parking lot so much to find a place close to the building because they've got an armload of kids and all the stuff that they're trying to take into the next building. We actually have a group of kids that serve every Sunday. I love this. They pull wagons. And they go out, they're called the Wagoneers, and they go out to each car and they pick up the preschoolers so that their experience, their Sunday experience is so much more exciting than anything they've done all week. Somebody comes to their car, puts them in a wagon, laughs and jokes and sings with them all the way up to the building, drops them off so they can walk into their preschool environment. That's what we want. Well, let me just tell you, we want to make that the safest possible way that we can do it. And so by doing a parking lot and by sending people to a certain area and then allowing, parents to be able to do it provides us an environment. You know what? I can make that sacrifice. I can make that sacrifice easily so that it makes an environment not only for kids to be safe and no mishaps with kids running out in front of cars, but also it says to new people who come into this place that we know how important it is to make this a safe environment for families. I'm willing to make that sacrifice. And on top of that, you might say, well, okay, I don't mind the parking thing at all. I quite like it. I go to big events on purpose just because I like people pointing me in the right direction. Okay? Great. I'm glad that's the case. You don't have an oil spot, you take better care of your car. I don't know than me. You don't have to worry about that. Well, let me tell you, the one way that you can do this is by every time we think of students and children, we think of the resources we need to be able to take care of them and everything. We actually built that building over there. If you've not been over there, that's an environment solely for children on purpose. And so we would love to double, maybe even triple the budget for children and for students. But right now we're being the best stewards we can to put the money where it can go. But you can give. And you can give generously to something like that. It gives you an opportunity to participate. And then on top of that, let me tell you, You could be a small group leader. You could be someone who comes and prepares an environment. You could work through the week to help other people be prepared to work with the next generation. There are many things that you can do. And I'm going to show you one here in just a moment that's really important, probably for all of us, for every parent. But let me say, as a church, we need to remember that we have one God. We need to love Him with all we've got. That's the measure. And we want to impress that on every person younger than we are. To parents today and to grandparents, those of you who are at home and you're the one that's taking those 3,000 hours, let me tell you this. Prepare your child for the road, not the road for your child. The whole idea of getting your children ready for what's next is that we're to prepare them to be able to ride on their own, to be independent. That's really our responsibility, is to get them to a point of independence. Now, every kid's going to be different. Every kid's going to have a time clock of their own of how they're going to do that. But as parents, as grandparents, anyone who has the influence on someone younger, we're wanting to prepare them for the road, not the road for them. That's going to be critical. And meaning that we don't stand in front of them, keep them, we don't isolate them, we don't keep them from experiencing life. We've got to prepare them for it. So don't isolate them from life. Prepare them to experience it. Don't isolate them from life, but get them ready. Get them ready so that they can do this on their own, that they have a faith of their own. It's so easy. Can you remember when you were 18, 19 years old? You were preparing to leave home. Maybe you left around that time, maybe a little later, but you had that experience of questioning whether or not God really existed, whether this was all real, whether you could take it as your own, whether you really believed it or not. It's important for us to make sure that they have a faith of their own. And you may be saying this today. I may not have done it right. I may not have done it right in the past. I may have so many things that I wish I'd have done differently, but I can start today to do better. We as a church can say we can start today to do better. No matter what the influence we have with the younger generation, we've got to do everything we can to start right now. And if there's been failures in the past, well, let's put those in the past, learn from them, but let's start today. It's never too late. It's never too late. And we want to do everything we can that between the 30 hours and the 40 hours and the 3,000 hours that we partner together to make the most of it. All of us together. Not forgetting that. And it takes one thing that's probably stands out more than any, and that's prayer. Praying the prayer that really expands our hearts and our vision for what we want to see happen in their lives. And so I want to take us to Ephesians chapter 1, where Paul was talking about young believers in a church, but this was his vision for them. Imagine if we prayed this for those that are younger than us, and that we have that influence in their life to see this happen. It's Ephesians chapter 1, and I want you to read this with me, would you? Out loud. And that we consider this to be something we might pray together. I ask the God of our Master, Jesus Christ, the God of glory, to make you intelligent and discerning in knowing Him personally, your eyes focused and clear, so that you can see exactly what it is He is calling you to do. Grasp the immensity of this glorious way of life He has for His followers. Oh, the utter extravagance of His work in us who trust Him. Endless energy, boundless strength. All this energy issues from Christ. God raised Him from death and set Him on a throne deep in heaven, in charge of running the universe. Everything from galaxies to governments, no name and no power exempt from His rule. Praying exactly from the message Moses gave Israel, now it translates to this. Last Sunday, we celebrated the resurrection of Jesus. And what did that mean? Is that just a one-day thing? No, that's every day. And we want them, the next generation, the ones younger than us that we have influence on, we want them to live by the power of that resurrection and to experience the things Paul prayed for these young believers. This is critical. You know what? You may have an ideal idea of what it should be to be a parent and what a home looks like and how it's supposed to be done. But there's the real. And the real is that life is broken, it's difficult, it's hard, but we have the ability to work together and the power behind us to accomplish it. I want to pray for us and pray that we are that kind of church, that we're those kind of parents and grandparents, those kind of influencers.